Mark Bennett did not look like a man who was about to lose his marriage that night. That was the strange part. He looked comfortable, loose, almost proud of himself. He stood in the middle of his company party with a drink in his hand and Vanessa Cole beside him, laughing like nothing in his life had a cost. Like every choice he had made would somehow stay hidden. Like the woman standing across the room was too tired, too loyal, or too ashamed to ever do anything about it. Claire Bennett stood near the wine table, holding a glass she had barely touched. She had not wanted to come that night. Mark had insisted. He said it would look strange if she stayed home. He said people expected to see his wife there. He said she needed to make an effort, as if 24 years of marriage had not already been one long effort on her part. So Claire came. She wore a navy dress Mark used to like years ago. She fixed her hair. She smiled at people she barely knew. She stood beside him for the first 20 minutes while he introduced her like an obligation. Then Vanessa arrived, and Mark's whole body changed. That was what Claire noticed first. Not the flirting, not the smile, the shift. His shoulders relaxed, his voice got warmer. He leaned toward Vanessa when she spoke. He laughed before her jokes even landed. Vanessa knew it too. Women like Vanessa always know when a man is performing for them. She looked across the room at Claire with a soft little smile, the kind that pretends to be harmless while it cuts straight through you. Then she said, loud enough for the people near Mark to hear, that some women did not know when they had already been replaced. A few people laughed. Not everyone. Just enough. Enough to make the room feel smaller. Enough to make Claire feel every year of that marriage sitting on her chest. But the insult was not what stayed with her. It was not Vanessa's smile. It was not the way people looked away afterward because they knew it had gone too far. It was Mark. Her husband laughed. Not loudly, not wildly. Just a small, easy laugh, like humiliating his wife had become normal to him. Then he put one hand lightly on Vanessa's back and said, "Claire makes everything dramatic. She can turn any night into a marriage problem." Claire did not answer. There are moments when a person knows that speaking will only give the other side a show. Mark wanted her to react. Vanessa wanted her to look wounded. The room wanted either drama or silence, and Claire gave them silence. Then her phone lit up in her hand, a bank alert. $4,800 transferred. Memo. Apartment deposit V.C. Claire stared at the screen. For a second, the noise of the party seemed to move far away from her. The laughter, the glasses, the polite conversations, Mark's voice across the room. All of it faded behind those words. Apartment deposit. V.C. Vanessa Cole. If you understand how betrayal can hide in plain sight, subscribe for more stories about divorce, custody battles, quiet evidence, and the moment people finally take their power back. Because that was the night Claire stopped asking herself who Vanessa was. She already knew. What she needed to know now was how long Mark had been using their money to build a life with her. Claire Bennett was 51 years old, and she had never been the kind of woman who chased attention. She lived in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, in a house that still had a 30-year mortgage attached to it. The front walkway had a crack Mark always promised to fix. The garage door made a tired grinding sound in the winter. The kitchen cabinets were older than Claire liked to admit. And on the side of the refrigerator, held up by magnets from old family vacations, was the calendar that kept the whole household breathing. Doctor appointments, school deadlines, insurance renewals, mortgage due dates, Emily's exams, dentist appointments, oil changes, birthday cards that needed to be mailed. Claire remembered all of it. That was the kind of woman she was. Not flashy, not loud, Not the sort of person who walked into a room and expected people to turn their heads. But if something in the family needed doing, Claire usually had it done before anyone else even remembered it existed. She worked as a records manager for a family medical clinic. It was not glamorous work. Nobody toasted her at company dinners. Nobody called her a visionary. Nobody acted impressed when she came home tired after sorting through insurance requests, patient files, billing corrections, and compliance forms. But if a patient needed a record from 8 years ago, Claire could find it. If an insurance company denied a claim because one date was wrong, Claire caught it. If the clinic had to prove that a form had been signed, filed, scanned, and stored properly, Claire knew exactly where it was. That kind of work does not look powerful from the outside, but it teaches a person something. Details matter. Dates matter. Paper trails matter. And sooner or later, people who lie get lazy with the details. For 24 years, Claire had been married to Mark Bennett. In the beginning, their marriage had been ordinary in the best way. Not perfect. Not cinematic. Just real. They had bills. They had arguments. They had months when money got tight and the washing machine broke at the worst possible time. They bought their house when they were still young enough to think a mortgage was romantic if two people signed it together. Mark changed jobs twice in 4 years, and each time Claire told him they would figure it out. And they did. When Mark wanted to complete a management certification, Claire agreed to use part of their savings to pay for it. It was not an easy decision. That money had been meant for repairs, maybe a small vacation, maybe breathing room. But Claire told him it was an investment in their future. Back then, Mark had seemed grateful. He kissed her forehead in the kitchen one night and told her she was the reason he kept going. Claire believed him. That is the painful part about old memories. They do not disappear just because someone changes. They sit there in your mind, still wearing the face of the person you thought you married. When Emily was born, Claire cut back her hours at the clinic so Mark could keep traveling for work. She told herself it was practical. One of them had to have more flexibility, and Mark's job was starting to pay more. So Claire became the one who adjusted. She handled daycare pickups, pediatric appointments, grocery lists, birthday parties, school paperwork, teacher emails, permission slips, allergy forms, missing library books, and the small emergencies that never show up on a paycheck, but can hold the family together or tear it apart. For a while, Mark noticed. He thanked her. He called her steady. He said he did not know what he would do without her. Then his career got better, and slowly, the thank yous became less common. He did not change overnight. Men like Mark rarely do. They change by inches, then act surprised when you finally measure the distance. First, he stopped asking about Claire's day. Then he started making little comments about her job. Nothing big enough to start a fight, just small cuts. He called it office paperwork, then clinic stuff. Then, one evening, in front of another couple at dinner, he called it small office work, and laughed like he had not meant anything by it. Claire smiled that night. She hated herself a little for smiling. When she reminded him about bills, he sighed like she was nagging him instead of managing the life they both lived in. When she asked about his schedule, he acted like she was trying to supervise him. When she brought up money, he told her she did not understand the pressure of being the real provider. The real provider. Claire remembered that phrase too, because she knew who packed Emily's lunch. She knew who paid the bills on time. She knew whose paycheck helped cover the mortgage when Mark was between commissions. She knew whose unpaid labor made his career possible. But she also knew how tired she was. So she did what a lot of wives do when the truth hurts too much to hold all at once. She explained it away. Stress, work pressure, a rough season, middle age. Maybe he felt unappreciated. Maybe she had been too sensitive. Maybe marriage was just like this after 24 years. Claire was not blind. She was loyal. And loyalty can make a decent person give too many chances to someone who has already stopped deserving them. She believed a long marriage should be repaired before it was abandoned. She believed people could get lost and still come home. She believed Mark was becoming someone cold because life had worn him down, not because someone else was warming the parts of him he had taken away from her. But a marriage usually does not die in one dramatic moment. It dies quietly. It dies when one person keeps giving and the other person starts calling that giving normal. It dies when sacrifice becomes expectation. It dies when respect thins out so slowly that by the time you notice it is gone, you are already living with a stranger. The first signs were small enough for Mark to deny, but they were steady enough for Claire to remember. He started coming home late. Not every night. That would have been too easy to question. It happened just often enough to become part of the new rhythm. A client dinner on Tuesday, a vendor meeting on Thursday, a strategy call on Friday that somehow required drinks afterward, a Saturday afternoon errand that took 3 hours longer than it should have. His explanations were always ready. That bothered Claire more than the lateness. There was never a pause, never a search for the right words. He answered too quickly, like a man who had practiced being casual. His phone changed too. For years. Mark had left it anywhere. On the kitchen counter, beside the couch, on the bathroom sink while he brushed his teeth. It used to buzz with sports scores, weather alerts, bank notifications, and group texts from work. Then it started landing face down. Then the password changed. Then he carried it with him from room to room, even if he was only going to the garage or refilling his coffee. When Claire asked about it, Mark gave her that tired smile. Not a kind smile. A smile meant to make her feel foolish. He said she was being paranoid. That word became useful to him. Paranoid when she asked why he was late. Paranoid when she asked why the credit card balance had gone up. Paranoid when she asked why Vanessa Cole from accounting was texting him after dinner. Paranoid when she noticed he had started taking calls outside. At first, Vanessa was only a name in his stories. Vanessa caught an error in a report. Vanessa stayed late to help the team. Vanessa understood the pressure everyone was under. Then, little by little, Vanessa became the comparison. Vanessa did not overreact. Vanessa understood business. Vanessa knew how to separate work from emotion. Vanessa did not make every little thing personal. Claire heard what Mark was really saying. Be less like yourself. Be easier. Be quieter. Be more like the woman I have started admiring more than my wife. The gaslighting became smoother with practice. When Claire asked about money, Mark said she never understood finances. When she asked about his schedule, he said she was controlling. When she asked about Vanessa, he told her she was embarrassing herself. When Claire worried that Emily was noticing the tension in the house, Mark accused her of using their daughter to make him feel guilty. That one hurt in a different place. Emily was 15. Old enough to hear silence at the dinner table. Old enough to notice when her father came home smelling like restaurant wine and another woman's perfume. Old enough to understand when her mother went quiet. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she was trying not to break down in front of her child. Still, Claire did not have proof. Not the kind that could survive Mark's denial. She had late nights, a changed password, a woman's name appearing too often, a husband who made her feel unreasonable for asking reasonable questions. Charges that were easy to explain one at a time. Stories that almost fit if Claire did not look too closely. Individually, everything had an excuse. Together, it started to feel like weight. Claire did not know the whole truth yet. But she knew there was a pattern. And patterns are where lies begin to lose their clean edges. Then came the first piece of proof Mark could not smile away. After the company party, Claire and Mark drove home in near silence. Mark had been drinking just enough to feel careless, not drunk. Just loose enough to say things he would later pretend were harmless. He leaned back in the passenger seat, loosened his tie, and told Claire not to ruin a good night. He said she needed to learn how to take a joke. He said Vanessa had not meant anything by it. He said people at work already thought Claire was difficult, and nights like this did not help. Then he laughed softly, like Claire's humiliation had been a small social inconvenience, and not something her own husband had joined in creating. Claire kept both hands on the steering wheel. She did not answer. Not because she had nothing to say. Because for the first time in months, she understood that words would only warn him. If she confronted him in that car, he would deny it. If she cried, he would call her unstable. If she shouted, he would remember the shouting and pretend the money did not exist. So she drove. At home, Mark went upstairs, like the night had ended normally. Claire stayed in the kitchen. She made tea and forgot to drink it. The house was quiet except for the refrigerator humming and the faint sound of Mark moving around in their bedroom, comfortable in a life he thought he still controlled. The next morning, while the house was still, Claire opened their joint bank account. Not his private email, not his phone, not some hidden account she had no right to touch. Their account, the one her paycheck went into, the one that paid the mortgage, the one that covered Emily's braces, car insurance, groceries, prescriptions, school fees, and all the ordinary expenses Mark never seemed to notice until he wanted credit for paying them. The transfer was still there. $4,800. Memo, apartment deposit, V.C. Claire looked at it for a long time. Then she searched backward. One charge became 3. 3 became 11. There were furniture payments, utility deposits, a renter's insurance policy, restaurant bills in neighborhoods Mark claimed he barely knew, hotel charges from weekends he said were work trips, airline tickets that did not match the conferences on his calendar. Some charges came from the joint account. Others were on the family credit card. None of them were large enough to empty the account. That was part of the cruelty. They were small enough to hide inside the noise of a household budget. Small enough to pass as normal if Claire was too busy, too tired, or too trusting to look. And for a while, she had been all 3. That was what made it worse. Mark had not only betrayed her, he had made her help pay for it. Claire felt heat rise in her chest. Her first instinct was to call him at work and demand answers. She imagined his voice turning sharp. She imagined him saying she was unstable. She imagined him telling her she had violated his privacy. She imagined him moving money, deleting records, changing passwords, and warning everyone that Claire had finally lost control. Then she remembered Vanessa's smile and Mark's laugh. So Claire did the hardest thing she had done in 24 years of marriage. She stayed quiet. She printed the statements. She downloaded the credit card records. She saved receipts as PDFs. She wrote down dates, amounts, account names, and memo lines. She marked what came from joint funds and what came from family credit. She did not add insults. She did not write angry notes in the margins. She did not create a diary full of pain and questions no court would read. She created a file. On the outside, she named it Household Records. It sounded harmless, almost boring. That was the point. Inside, it held the first clean pieces of the truth. Claire still did not know how far Mark had gone. She did not know about the lawyer yet. She did not know about the custody plan. She did not know about the child support worksheet, or the DNA invoice, or the money he had tried to move where she would not see it. But she knew enough to stop asking him for honesty. From that morning on, Claire would let the documents speak first. Claire met Patricia Grant on a Wednesday morning in a small office above a bank on the older side of town. It was not the kind of office Mark would have respected. No glass walls, no marble lobby, no receptionist with a headset and a polished smile. Just a narrow hallway, framed diplomas, a coffee machine that sounded tired, and a woman behind a desk who had seen enough broken marriages to know when someone was still trying not to fall apart. Patricia was 58 years old, with silver hair pulled back neatly and eyes that missed very little. She did not gasp when Claire placed the folder on her desk. She did not lean forward and say, "Mark was evil." She did not tell Claire she was brave. And she did not promise that revenge would feel good. Good attorneys rarely speak like that. The serious ones know better. They understand that the moment a client walks in wanting revenge, the other side has already won part of the battle. Patricia opened the folder and read quietly. First the bank statement, then the credit card charges, then the memo line, apartment deposit, V, C. She looked at it for a long moment, then lifted her eyes to Claire. According to the laws in this state, the money trail may matter, she said. But we need facts, not anger. Claire nodded. She wanted to look calm. She wanted to look prepared. But her hands were folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone pale. Patricia noticed. She softened her voice, but not the message. Pain explains why you're here, she said. It does not prove what happened. Documents do. That sentence stayed with Claire. Until then, the folder had felt like proof that she had been hurt. Proof that Mark had betrayed her. Proof that Vanessa was not just a woman at a company party with a cruel smile and a hand on Claire's marriage. Patricia made it something else. A record. A timeline. A case. A way to separate the wound from the facts. And that mattered, because Mark had spent months trying to make Claire sound emotional, dramatic, paranoid, unstable. The kind of woman who saw betrayal because she was afraid of getting older. The kind of wife a judge might feel sorry for, but not necessarily believe. Patricia understood that kind of man. She had seen him before. Different face, different suit, same pattern. She told Claire what to gather, and just as importantly, what to leave alone. No breaking into Mark's phone. No guessing passwords. No logging into accounts that were not hers. No secret recordings unless the law clearly allowed it. No late-night messages written out of pain. Because angry words have a way of appearing in court without the context that created them. Claire was to collect what she had every right to access. Joint bank statements. Family credit card records. Mortgage documents. Tax returns. Insurance paperwork. Pay stubs. Bonus letters. Medical bills. School emails. Appointment reminders. Receipts for Emily's activities. Text messages about missed pickups, missed concerts, missed parent meetings, and every ordinary responsibility Mark had treated like optional charity. Not because Patricia wanted to punish him for being a bad husband. Because custody and money are not decided by speeches. They are decided by patterns. And Claire already knew how to find patterns. That was the part Mark had forgotten. Or maybe he had never understood it in the first place. Claire had spent years managing records for a medical clinic. She knew how to organize chaos. She knew how to match dates. She knew how to find the one form everybody else swore had disappeared. Mark thought she was just good at keeping the house running. He had no idea that skill was about to become the thing that hurt him most. Patricia turned a page, then asked a question that made the room feel colder. Has he mentioned custody? Claire almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because the idea of Mark suddenly fighting to be an equal parent felt so insulting that laughter was the only thing her body could reach before anger. Mark loved Emily. Claire had never denied that. But love and responsibility are not the same thing. For years, Mark had treated fatherhood like something he could step into when it was convenient. He showed up for the big moments if work allowed. He took pictures at birthdays. He gave Emily cash on holidays. He told people she was his whole world. But Claire knew the daily truth. She knew who filled out the school forms. She knew who sat in the urgent care waiting room when Emily's allergy reaction scared them both. She knew who remembered that Emily needed a quiet morning before math tests. She knew who bought the poster board at 9 at night because Emily forgot a project was due. She knew who had rearranged work schedules, skipped lunches, answered teacher emails, and sat on the edge of Emily's bed when anxiety made her cry. Mark had missed 2 parent conferences in a row. He forgot an orthodontist appointment after promising to take Emily himself. He missed her fall concert because of what he called a client dinner. Later, Claire found a restaurant charge that same night near Vanessa's apartment. He did not know the name of Emily's allergy medication without looking at the bottle. But 2 weeks before Claire met Patricia, she had overheard him in the garage. He thought the door was closed. It was not. His voice had been low, irritated, almost offended. He said he wanted 50-50 custody. Then he said he was not going to let Claire eat him alive with child support. That was when Claire understood something uglier than the affair. Mark was not only preparing to leave. He was preparing to rewrite fatherhood. He wanted the court to see him as present enough to reduce what he owed, even if Emily had been living mostly in Claire's care for years. Patricia listened without interrupting. Then she picked up a yellow legal pad and wrote 2 words: parenting calendar. From that day forward, Claire wrote everything down, not with emotion, not with insults, not with long explanations about how alone she felt. Just facts. Who drove Emily to school? Who picked her up? Who handled doctor appointments? Who paid for field trips? Who answered teacher emails? Who bought medication? Who helped with homework? Who sat with Emily when she was nervous? Who remembered that she hated tomatoes but would eat soup when she was sick? Who was home? Who was absent? Who promised? Who forgot? Claire did not exaggerate. She did not need to. That was the quiet power of the truth. It did not need decoration. The first legal twist was not that Mark had cheated. That hurt, of course. It hurt in the deep, humiliating way betrayal always hurts, when it is done by someone who once knew every soft place in you. But cheating alone was not the whole case. The real twist was that Mark had been building a version of himself for divorce court. A reasonable man, a devoted father, a financially burdened husband, a man trapped with a dramatic wife who spent too much time imagining problems. And while he was building that version on paper, Claire had been living the real one every day. Then came the DNA invoice. Claire found it by accident, or at least that was how it looked at first. She was searching the family email account for old insurance forms. It was an account they had both used for years because it was connected to their health plan, school portals, pharmacy notices, and household bills. Mark had never treated it like a secret because it had never mattered to him before. That was another thing careless people forget. The places they ignore are often the places where evidence survives. The email was buried between a dental reminder and a notice from the pharmacy. The sender was a genetic testing lab. The payment name was Mark Bennett. The mailing address connected back to the apartment near Vanessa Cole. There was no result attached. No explanation. No clean answer that told Claire exactly what had happened. And somehow, that made it worse. Because it left her sitting there in the dim light of the kitchen, staring at a document that did not give her certainty, only possibility. A DNA test. A hidden apartment. A woman Mark had defended in public more easily than he had defended his own wife. Claire printed the invoice and placed it in the folder. The next morning, she brought it to Patricia. Patricia read it once. Then she read it again. Her face did not change much, but Claire had begun to understand that Patricia's quiet meant she was thinking carefully. This may matter financially, Patricia said, if marital money is being used to support another household, especially if he is preparing for another dependent. Another dependent. Claire hated how clean the phrase sounded. It was the kind of phrase that belonged in forms and calculations, not in the wreckage of a marriage. But beneath it was something raw. The possibility that Mark and Vanessa were not only sleeping together, not only renting an apartment, not only spending money that should have belonged to the family Mark already had, they might have been preparing for a child, or using the possibility of one to plan their finances. Either way, Mark had been telling Claire that Emily was too expensive, while he quietly made room in his budget for another life. That was the moment something shifted in Claire. The divorce stopped feeling only like heartbreak. It became strategy. And strategy was colder, cleaner, safer. For 3 months, Claire lived beside Mark like nothing had changed. That may sound impossible until you understand what survival looks like inside a house where trust is already gone. She made breakfast. She drove Emily to school. She went to the clinic and answered record requests in the same calm voice she had always used. She paid the electric bill. She folded laundry. She bought groceries. She sat across from Mark at dinner while he complained about pressure, budgets, work politics, and how unfair everyone had been to him lately. Claire listened. Sometimes she even nodded. Not because she believed him, because every ordinary day was giving her another page. By day, she was still his wife. By night, she updated the folder. Mark mistook her quiet for defeat. Vanessa mistook it for embarrassment. That is the mistake arrogant people make. They think if you do not perform your pain in public, then you must not have power. They think silence means you have accepted the story they wrote for you. But Claire had not accepted anything. She was waiting. And waiting is not weakness when a person knows what she is waiting for. The next major piece arrived by mail. A plain white envelope came with the rest of the household paperwork. Bills, advertisements, a school notice, a bank offer nobody wanted. It was addressed to Mark. Claire almost placed it on his desk unopened. Then she saw the return address. A financial planning office. The same office that had appeared on one of the family credit card charges. Claire stood there for a long moment with the envelope in her hand. Then she opened it. Not because she wanted to snoop for drama. Because her name was still tied to the accounts Mark was using. Because the credit card was still part of their household. Because the money being moved around was not only his to move. Inside was a copy of a worksheet. Projected Child Support Worksheet. Claire read the title once, then again. Mark's name was on the form. Vanessa Cole's name appeared in the notes, and beneath that was the phrase Claire would remember for the rest of the case. Expected dependent. The page did not prove whether Vanessa was pregnant. It did not prove whether a child had already been born. It did prove that Mark was planning his financial future around Vanessa while trying to shrink what he owed to Claire and Emily. Then Claire saw the income section. It was wrong. Not slightly wrong. Conveniently wrong. Mark had listed his base salary, but not the year-end bonus Claire had seen referenced in earlier paperwork. Not the commission adjustment. Not the deferred compensation. Not the consulting income that appeared to be moving through an LLC she had never heard of. An LLC connected to a close friend. Claire felt that same heat rise in her chest, but this time it was different. Not panic. Not humiliation. Recognition. This was not just cheating. This was planning. When Patricia reviewed the worksheet, she did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She tapped the page once with her finger and said, "That is a discovery issue." Claire had heard the word before. Discovery. It sounded simple, almost boring, like something that happened in conference rooms and filing cabinets. But Patricia explained what it meant in a divorce. It meant Mark did not get to decide which numbers were real. It meant income could be requested, traced, questioned, and compared. It meant accounts could be examined. It meant bonuses, side income, transfers, and business interests could become part of the conversation, whether Mark wanted them there or not. For the first time in months, Claire felt something close to relief. Not happiness. Not victory. Just relief. Because Mark's lies had always worked best in private. In the house. In the kitchen. In the car. In the moments where he could speak over her, twist her words, and make her feel small. But documents did not flinch. Documents did not get embarrassed. Documents did not apologize just to keep the peace. The confrontation came 2 nights later. Claire waited until Emily was upstairs with headphones on, working on homework and pretending not to notice the tension that had settled over the house like bad weather. Mark stood at the kitchen island, scrolling through his phone. Comfortable. Irritated, still acting like the house belonged to the version of reality he controlled. Claire walked in with one bank statement. Not the whole folder. Not the DNA invoice. Not the worksheet. Just 1 page. She placed it on the counter between them. Mark looked at it, then at her. Claire kept her voice even. How long have you been paying for her apartment with our money? For half a second, his face told the truth. It was quick. A flicker. A tightening around the eyes. A small drop in the mouth before he remembered who he was supposed to be. Then the performance began. He said she was unstable. He said she had invaded his privacy. He said she was poisoning the family. He said this was exactly why he had been unhappy for years. He said no judge would respect a woman who acted this way. He said she had no idea how bad she was making herself look. Claire let him talk. That was new. Before, she would have interrupted, defended herself, explained, tried to make him understand that she was not crazy, not cruel, not imagining things. But Patricia had taught her something without ever saying it directly. You do not have to argue with a man who is giving you more evidence every time he opens his mouth. So Claire waited. When Mark finally stopped, she looked at the bank statement and then back at him. I didn't break into anything. Mark, she said. I read our account. The room changed. Not loudly. No slammed doors. No dramatic confession. Just a shift. Mark looked at the paper again, and for the first time, Claire saw calculation replace arrogance. He was not thinking about her feelings. He was thinking about exposure. He finally understood that Claire was not holding suspicions anymore. She was holding records. And once a man like Mark understands that, his tone changes. The anger is still there, but behind it comes fear. Not guilt. Not yet. Just fear of what the truth might cost him. By the time Mark realized Claire had stopped arguing and started documenting, the divorce had already moved beyond his control. The hearing was held on a gray Monday morning. The kind of morning that made the courthouse windows look colder than they probably were. Mark arrived in a dark suit. He looked calm from a distance. That was always one of his talents. Mark knew how to appear reasonable in public. He knew how to lower his voice, straighten his tie, and make himself look like the kind of man who was simply trying to survive a difficult marriage. He had built his story carefully. He was the exhausted husband, the misunderstood father, the man who wanted fairness, the man who had been pushed too far by a wife who could not let go. He wanted 50-50 custody. He wanted the court to believe he had always been an involved parent. He wanted child support calculated on the version of his income he preferred. And more than anything, he wanted Claire to look emotional, bitter, punishing, unable to move on. That had always been his safest argument. If he could make Claire look unstable, maybe nobody would look too closely at what he had done. Vanessa was not in the courtroom. She did not have to be. Her name was already sitting inside the file. On the apartment deposit, on the notes, near the charges. Beside the worksheet. Sometimes the person who is not in the room still takes up more space than anyone else. Claire sat beside Patricia with her hands folded in her lap. She was nervous, of course. Anyone would be. Courtrooms have a way of making even honest people feel like they are about to be judged for breathing wrong. But Claire was not the same woman who had stood near the wine table while Mark laughed at her. That woman had been wounded. This woman was prepared. Patricia did not begin with outrage. She began with the money. That was the smartest thing. Anger can be debated. Pain can be dismissed. But numbers, when they are organized well, have a different kind of voice. First came the apartment deposit. $4,800 from the joint account. Then came the furniture purchases. Not luxury pieces, nothing dramatic enough to shock anyone by itself. Just enough to furnish a second life. A table, a mattress, lamps, kitchen supplies, then the utility deposits, then the renter's insurance, then the restaurant charges, then the hotel bills, then the weekend travel placed on the family credit card. Patricia moved through each page slowly. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Every document landed with its own weight. One charge could have been explained. 2 charges could have been excused. A few charges could have been called confusion. But page after page, date after date, amount after amount, the story became harder for Mark to interrupt. His attorney tried to make it sound like a private marital dispute. Patricia let him try. That was the thing about a good attorney. She did not chase every argument. She waited until the other side finished trying to make smoke, then opened the window. When Mark's attorney suggested Claire was angry over the end of the marriage, Patricia moved to income. Mark had presented himself as financially strained. He claimed he was stretched thin, overburdened. A man trying to maintain 2 households after separation while still being fair to everyone involved. It sounded sympathetic, until Patricia brought out the records he had not volunteered. The year-end bonus, the commission adjustment, the deferred compensation, the consulting income, the LLC paperwork connected to a close friend. The courtroom did not explode. Real courtrooms rarely do. Nobody gasped. Nobody shouted. Nobody stood up and pointed a finger. But the room changed. You could feel it in the silence. Mark stopped looking at Claire. He looked down at the table. That was the first honest thing he had done all morning. Patricia did not accuse him of being rich. That was not the point. She did not pretend Claire was entitled to punish him for the affair. That was not the point either. The point was simpler. Mark had asked the court to calculate support using an incomplete version of his financial life. An incomplete truth has a way of sounding like a lie when the missing pieces finally arrive. Then came the parenting calendar. Claire had worried about that part. Not because it was weak, but because it felt so personal. It was one thing to show bank records. It was another thing to lay out months of motherhood like evidence. But Patricia had been right. The calendar mattered. Day after day, it showed who had been there. Claire at school meetings, Claire at doctor visits, Claire paying for Emily's activities, Claire emailing teachers, Claire taking time off when Emily was sick, Claire buying medication, Claire helping with assignments, Claire handling the ordinary parts of parenting that no one photographs and everyone depends on. And Mark, absent, late, unavailable, traveling, at client dinners, at meetings that somehow matched restaurant charges near Vanessa's apartment. He still asked for 50-50 custody. He still sat there with the face of a father who wanted to be taken seriously. But the calendar made his request look less like devotion and more like arithmetic. More custody meant less child support. That was the part he did not want said out loud. Patricia did not need to say it loudly. The pattern said it for her. Finally, she introduced the projected child support worksheet. She handled it carefully. She did not accuse Vanessa of being pregnant. She did not make claims the documents could not prove. She did not turn the courtroom into gossip. She simply showed that Mark had been calculating possible future obligations connected to another household, while claiming he could not fully support the child he already had. That was the kind of contradiction even calm people notice. The judge looked at Mark for a long moment. Not with anger. Judges do not always need anger. Sometimes disappointment is worse. Then he asked why marital funds had been used to support another woman's apartment while Mark was presenting himself as financially unable to meet reasonable support obligations for his daughter. Mark opened his mouth, then stopped. There are moments when language fails dishonest people, not because they have no words. They usually have too many. It fails because every available answer makes them look worse. If he said it was personal, the money still mattered. If he said it was temporary, the charges still continued for months. If he said Claire misunderstood, the memo line was sitting right there. Apartment deposit V. C. For once, Mark had nothing clean to say. The consequences did not arrive like thunder. They came in measured sentences. That is how the legal system often works. Quietly, slowly, in language that sounds almost boring until you realize someone's future is being rearranged by every word. The hidden bonus was included in the income discussion. The money spent on Vanessa's apartment was considered during property division. Mark's request for equal custody was weakened by the parenting record. Child support was recalculated using a more complete picture of his earnings. Patricia's request for attorney fees was taken seriously because of Mark's lack of financial transparency. The LLC records were ordered for further review. No one called it karma in the courtroom. No one needed to. Karma was Mark sitting there in the suit he had chosen to look respectable, listening while numbers did what Claire's tears never could. They proved him wrong. Mark did not lose because Claire cried harder. He lost because her records were cleaner than his lies. And for the first time since that company party, Claire watched him sit quietly while someone else controlled the room. That was the part he had never expected. He had expected anger. He had expected pleading. He had expected Claire to make a scene, so he could point to the scene and say, "See, this is what I've been dealing with." But Claire gave him documents, dates, receipts, a calendar, a paper trail. There is a certain kind of regret that does not come from conscience. It comes from getting caught. At first, that was the only kind Mark seemed to have. He regretted the records. He regretted the memo line. He regretted the worksheet. He regretted the LLC. He regretted underestimating the woman who had spent half her adult life keeping track of everything he thought did not matter. But later, when the immediate shock faded, something else seemed to settle in. Maybe it was not full remorse. Maybe men like Mark did not reach that place easily. But there was a moment in the hallway after the hearing when he looked at Claire differently. Not with love. Not with control. Not even with anger. With the uncomfortable recognition that she had not become strong overnight. She had been strong the whole time. He had just benefited from calling it loyalty. Claire did not walk out of that courtroom rich. That was never the story. She did not buy a mansion. She did not post photographs beside a new car. She did not call Vanessa and remind her what the judge had said. She did not turn her healing into a performance for the people who had watched her be humiliated. That was never the kind of victory Claire wanted. She wanted quiet. She wanted safety. She wanted to ask a question in her own home without checking a man's face first. She wanted Emily to stop listening through walls. She wanted a bank account that did not feel like a crime scene. After the divorce moved forward, Claire found a smaller townhouse on the quiet side of town. It was not fancy. The stairs were narrow. The closets were too small. The kitchen had old cabinets and one drawer that stuck if you pulled it too fast. But there were trees outside the windows. There was morning light in Emily's room. There was a little dining area where they could eat dinner without waiting to see what mood Mark brought home. Emily had her own room. She chose soft green curtains and arranged her books by color, the way she used to when she was younger and the world felt easier to organize. The custody schedule was printed and placed on the refrigerator. Clear. Simple. No guessing. No begging. No last-minute promises that disappeared when something better came along. The bills came in Claire's name. The bank account held only money she had earned, saved, and protected. For the first time in years, Claire could look at a statement without wondering what story was hiding inside it. That was freedom. Not loud freedom. Not the kind people make speeches about. Just the quiet freedom of knowing the ground under your feet belongs to you again. Mark did regret what he had done. Not only because of the money. Not only because child support had been recalculated. Not only because the court had seen through the version of himself he tried to present. He regretted it because he finally understood what he had mistaken for weakness. Claire had not been powerless. She had been patient. She had loved him long enough to give him chances he did not deserve. She had protected his image, protected their home, protected Emily's peace as much as she could. She had tried to repair something he was already using as cover. And when he used those chances to build another life with another woman, Claire stopped begging for honesty. She started protecting her own. One afternoon, months later, Mark sent her a message. It was short. Too short for what he had done. He asked if they could talk. There had been a time when Claire would have answered immediately. She would have wanted closure, an apology, an explanation. Some sentence that made the pain make sense. But by then, she understood something that had taken her too long to learn. Some explanations only reopen the door. Some apologies are just another way for the person who hurt you to step back into the center of the room. Claire read the message once. Then she placed the phone face down on the kitchen table, across from her. Emily was working on a school presentation, surrounded by note cards, markers, and the kind of teenage panic that made the world feel normal again. Claire helped her daughter rearrange the slides. She heated soup for dinner. She paid the electric bill. She looked around the small townhouse and felt, for the first time in a long time, no need to prove anything to anyone. That was the real ending. Not revenge that lasts forever. Not bitterness that keeps you tied to the person who broke you. Not a dramatic speech. Not a final confrontation. Just a quiet house. A clear schedule. A daughter who could breathe again. And a woman who no longer needed the man who betrayed her to admit what she already knew. Peace does not always come when the other person suffers. Sometimes it comes when their regret stops being your responsibility. If this story stayed with you, subscribe for more stories about betrayal, divorce, custody battles, and the quiet moments when people take their power back.